it up for himself and fired it past bowler.
Dennison and Venus overlap and then Downing through for Wolves. Ball 2-0.
Cook with the corner, flicked on for ball, and he's deadly from that range.
Wolverhampton Wanderers were plying their trade in the third tier for only the second time in this existence. Finances were on their arse, the club was going nowhere, and they hadn't even hit rock bottom yet. But this is Wolves, this is Steve Bull, and this is how they saved one another. Where were we all? Of course, Wolverhampton Wanderers were in Division 3. They thought they'd bottomed out, but the chaos was only just beginning. July the 8th, 1985, Tommy Docherty is sacked as club manager, replaced but only temporarily by Sammy Chapman. By September, after a rip-roaring start that saw Wolves win just one game, home to York City narrowly, Wolves got their permanent manager, same as an old one, Bill McGarry, who had since been employed in Saudi Arabia as well as Zambia. Typical to the insanity that populated Molineux at this time, he would barely make it to bonfire night before he clashed with the mysterious and the anonymous Allied Properties. Sacked, Chapman was airdropped back into the hot seat, and this, with its conceding of 5 at home to Swansea in September, as well as losses on the road against Bournemouth, Bury, Chesterfield and Darlington, was not rock bottom yet. Wolves kept relegation at bay with a 3-1 win over Cardiff on April the 26th, only to be effectively relegated by the next time they took to the field, which was an unmitigated disaster. Needing a 20-goal swing and a whole lot of miracles to go their way in the final 2 games, Wolves entered the second half of their penultimate fixture at Wigan 3 up. They had returned to their dressing room a 4th Division team and 5-3 losers 45 minutes later. Now the club had hit rock bottom, performance-wise, and in the fact that they would be plying their trade from the 4th tier. Or would they? Hello 4th Division, hello administration for the second time in 4 years. Lloyds Bank had just about had enough of Allied Properties, so they sent in the receivers. The proposal was as such: Wolves would bypass the 4th Division and go straight into the conference, with Enfield Town replacing them. This the days before promotion and relegation from non-league. Wolves would be eternally trapped in there. Well, until governing bodies decided it'd be a good idea to build a bridge between the Football League and the conference. The Football League kicked off on August 23rd. The general manager of the conference told Wolves that if they could cobble together 12 players by the 16th, they could play non-league football. This is how bad it had gotten. Then, in a case of first time for anything, Allied Properties made themselves heard in Wolverhampton. But it was only to retort to a previous announcement that Wolves had debts of £2.4 million, and actually it was them who were owed £4 million. Then another bank came for them, from the Middle East, over a 700 grand debt. If you've come for a football video, not financial advice, I'm sorry. However, that was the final act of Allied Properties and the Barties in Wolverhampton. They no longer could consent to divvying up the club. Molineux was sold to the council for £1.1 million. Asda revealed themselves as unlikely heroes when they gave the club £1.8 million to build a superstore behind the North Bank. The debts had been serviced. Wolves could now peel themselves off of rock bottom. They were now owned by construction firm JJ Gallagher, but the real hero is who we have to introduce next. Yes, the man himself, Steve Bull. Born and bred into a Tipton council estate, he plied his trade everywhere, from bed factories, builders' yards and warehouses, whilst playing football at every non-working minute he could spare. And yet it was at West Brom of all places where he got his big break, signing his first contract at the age of 20. He netted 3 goals in the second tier for the Baggies, but once Ron Saunders took charge, he was unbelievably out of favour. He'd be saved from that life by Graham Turner, who was hired to take over Brian Little in October 1986. His first act was to prize Bully away from the Hawthorns for just £54,000. Because of the mess Wolves were in, it was a big investment. To say it paid off, an understatement. His debut came in a 3-0 defeat to Wrexham on November the 22nd before, ineligible, he watched his new side in an FA Cup first round second replay against Chorley. It couldn't have gone much worse.
The extent of that challenge was brought home to new manager Graham Turner in Wolves' exit from the FA Cup.
The reality had come straight into their ears. Bouncing back from that came with a defeat at the end of January against Crewe Alexandra. That day Mickey Holmes scored what was his first goal on a run of 7 successive games in which he found the back of the net. They were absolutely nowhere after that Crewe defeat at the end of January, residing in 14th between such luminaries as Peterborough United and Halifax Town. Come the start of March, however, via an unbeaten February, Wolves were back in the thick of it, well ensconced into the playoff picture by the start of March with a win at home to Colchester. Through a partnership with Andy Much up front, Bull netted 15 league goals as Wolves continued to forge their way up the division. After a blip to Orient, Wolves marched to 8-1 on the spin to drag themselves right into contention for automatic promotion. 1 point behind Southend United, it was the Shrimpers themselves who stood in Wolves' way on April the 24th. A sickening 1-0 defeat at Roots Hall left Wolves to the playoffs, where after a nerve-shredding 2-legged win over Colchester, Wolves would be paired off with Aldershot Town. An immediate return to the third tier was the prize on offer.
Won the match 1-0, and they now go up to the third division for the first time in 11 years. The goal from Bobby Barnes in the 83rd minute was enough to give Aldershot.
But the 3-0 aggregate defeat was the cold hard reality for Wolverhampton Wanderers now. They would start the 87-88 campaign on the beach away to Scarborough. They couldn't have been further from those floodlit nights at Honved if they'd tried. Nonetheless, it was the season where it all began to come together once again. It was Steve Bull's first full season in the old gold and he did not disappoint, slapping in 52 goals in all competitions. Molineux had never seen anything like it. After a defeat at Bolton to begin October, Wolves could barely be stopped, rising from the mid-table to sit at top of the pile after a New Year's win at home to Hereford. The long telegraphed promotion was finally confirmed on April the 26th with a visit to South Wales and a 3-1 triumph over Newport County. This only a week after a very special night at Molineux.
85,000 made the pilgrimage to Wembley, much grateful for some dubious goalkeeping. Sealed when Robbie Dennison threaded a free kick into the top corner. The Sherpa Trophy might not be the most prestigious they've ever won, but this season could mark an important watershed.
From just 2,886 people watching Wolves back in a previous round at Swansea to over 80,000 at the National Stadium. Forget 1960, Wolves had done the double in 88. OK, it wasn't the Championship and FA Cup double like Stan Cullis nearly achieved, but the long distinguished 4th Division title and Sherpa Vans trophy double. Sherpa Vans, what you'd now call the Virtu or Leasing.com or Papa John's trophy these days. In essence, the Football League trophy and a good excuse to celebrate. Wolves were back. It might have only been into the third tier, but they were back.
Played it towards Bull, it's a hat-trick!
Wolverhampton Wanderers could not be stopped. Steve Bull could not be stopped. He netted 37 goals in the league alone. That's only 7 fewer than 16th place Cardiff City as an entire team. Take a run of form for the ages in November and December, for example. It began with a standard double at Huddersfield before 3 hat-tricks on the spin, the first 2 of which generated 4 goals apiece, as Preston in the league, Port Vale in the old Sherpa Vans were destroyed, whilst Mansfield Town fell 4 days later. 52 goals in all competitions meant that England could no longer refuse to look at Bull. Together with Andy Much, they had scored 148 goals in all competitions across 2 seasons. First they found the England B team, then thanks to the late climax of the 1988-89 campaign, Gary Lineker playing his football in Barcelona in a naturally tardy conclusion to La Liga, and the Roos Cup interfering with that, Steve Bull was called up to the England national team.
Bull, and again! Oh!
Steve Bull was now being deified, and in the football landscape in the late 80s, that meant he naturally had a Wolves fanzine named after him, A Load of Bull. What wasn't a load of bull was Wolves, now back in the second tier, not that it appeared to be daunting them in what was a strong league featuring Leeds, Newcastle and West Ham.
Ball's in again. Yes!
The cross comes in and Steve Bull's unmarked. He scores in the last minute.
On New Year's Day, Steve Bull naturally grabbed all four in a 4-1 win over Newcastle. Who's watching? Yep, it's Bobby Robson, the national team manager. That would become known as the moment that Steve Bull earned his place at Italia 90. 4 months later, he'd earned his first start for the Three Lions alongside Lineker against Czechoslovakia at Wembley. Whilst it's now immortalised for Paul Gascoigne's breakthrough into the team as he assisted 2 and scored 1, who did he assist? Oh, come on, you already knew.
Got a curl too. Oh, that's a lovely goal.
Bully for England, they shouted. The Wolves man was now a shoo-in for the 22-man World Cup squad. In the midst of this gloriously brilliant personal night for Steve Bull, it was Wolves' promotion push that was being derailed. After a 5-0 hammering of Leicester on April the 10th, the club were well within the shake-up for the playoffs, but 3 defeats in 4 had Wolves effectively consigned to the second tier. There would be no magical ascension from 4th to the first tier. Once all the hoopla about Wolves' Steve Bull playing in a World Cup had died down, the club underwent a massive makeover in the summer of 1990. First, it was Sir Jack Hayward, his edict of renovating Molineux. By 93, 3 new stands had opened. In approach to a much-changed venue, more of the same of course, as Bully continued to average 20 goals a season in the second tier of English football.
City player. Steele. Ball lurking at the middle. It goes ball!
Cook straight away into the area and the header there is in for Wolves. And they remain 1 goal behind. Paul Cook whipping it in. Flicked away by Webster. Ball on the back post. It's in the back of the net now.
And onside. Aims towards ball in the middle. And the much ball coming.
Put Charlton in trouble. And now the chance. And the shot himself. Does so. And fires home.
Play waved on. Paul Bird still picking himself up. Berg plays the ball in for Bull. Oh, that's it. Edwards. For Ashley. Floats in a good cross appeals for offside. Way play on Bull.
Just a shame then that Wolves continued to come apart at the seams late on in seasons. From the playoffs on March 5th, 1991 to 2 wins from their final 15, ensuring of a 2-place regression into 12th. The subsequent campaign saw a mid-season revolution propelled out of the bottom third of the table and into the playoff conversation by February, only to quickly fall away soon after. The finish, 11th, making it 3 successive seasons of safety in mid-table. Rounding this era off, a whole new ballgame as they called it, Division 1, Wolves began the 92-93 season brilliantly, unbeaten in 12. They'd come unstuck with strings of defeats in fits and starts, and ultimately too many of those patches saw them cast to a very familiar position between 10th and 12th. In order to become a Premier League team, you had to be able to attract Premier stars and play Premier football. In the summer of 1993, once he'd helped rebuild Molineux, Sir Jack Hayward set about rebuilding a team that still ran on 4th Division parts. Ahead of the 93-94 campaign, in came Jeff Thomas for £800k, before Steve Bull got a new strike partner in form of the £750,000 rated David Kelly from Newcastle. Kevin Keane arrived from West Ham, before Cyril Regis, Peter Shirtliff all added experience to the unit.
New season. Plenty has changed during the summer, but much has stayed the same, such as the goal scorer, Steve Bull.
The start of a new era, the momentum was with Wolves, only for Steve Bull to go down to injury in September. Jeff Thomas looked all set to guide the club through that period until his season was ended by a horror tackle at Sunderland the following week. By bonfire night, Graham Turner's job was on the line as the club had failed to win a league game in October. Bully was back, however, netting at home to Notts County before a typical hat-trick against Derby 4 days later. That 4 without a win in October, all drawn, could more optimistically be inflated to unbeaten in 11. Too many draws though meant that Wolves were in their natural habitat of 12th at Christmas. Ultimately, the club were traipsing idly through the remainder of the season, so Hayward bit the bullet and sacked Turner, replacing him with a man coming off the impossible job. It couldn't have been as impossible as Wolves' return from the pits of potential non-league to the precipice of the Premier League. Nonetheless, Graham Taylor was hired on March 29th. Unfortunately for Taylor, defeats at Millwall and Barnsley on the final straight ended Wolves' outside push for the playoffs. With Taylor in charge, the purchasing continued into the summer of '94. Tony Daly and Steve Froggatt through the door on a permanent deal, whilst Paul Stewart and Mark Walters were borrowed from Liverpool. Whilst Daly's time at Molineux would unfortunately be plagued by injuries in a 4-year span, Froggatt would become one of the better prospects in the old gold.
Equaliser a week ago at Notts County. Now we make sure that Wolves are in front against West Bromwich Albion. It's flicked on to Kelly, and now it might be game, set, match for Wolverhampton Wanderers.
From despair at Taylor's appointment, a win over West Brom in the third game of the season soon got fans back on side. Wolves were earmarked as promotion candidates, remarkable given that because of English football's restructuring, only one automatic place was offered up. By September, Wolves topped the division after a bruising 5-0 thrashing of Southend, which took place shortly after the funeral of club great Billy Wright. Ultimately, Tony Daly's season would end prematurely with injury in December, and thanks to yet more rotten luck, with Steve Bull absent for swathes of the campaign, Wolves were expected to peter out.
Good work by Paul Graves. De Wolf getting it forward, good flick on by Goodman, now Bull. Oh, that's a lovely chip! Wolves, and it was this man who got the goal. Steve Bull, can he do it again? Yes, he can! Bull is free in the middle, gets a touch and scores!
And yet Taylor continued to scheme in the market, bringing in Gordon Cowans from Villa, Don Goodman from Sunderland and the aptly named John de Wolf from the Eredivisie. They were able to complete one of the quirkier comebacks in football in history, coming back from 3 down in a penalty shootout against Sheffield Wednesday in the FA Cup, winning 4-3. What suddenly looked a good route to Wembley via Leicester and Crystal Palace was ended in a home replay to the latter in the quarter-final. Shaking off the despair of that defeat, Wolves went within 6 points of leaders Middlesbrough on April Fool's Day with another crucial win over Southend. Wolves had rocketed up the division against all adversity, Bull managing to net 16 goals, but it ultimately meant the playoffs. They couldn't be accused of playing within themselves, as the rest of April generated 3 3-3 draws. Ultimately, in ending the season with 4 draws, Wolves slipped out of the automatic contention and into the playoffs.
It's a dangerous cross by Dennison, it's a tremendous goal! And he sets it up for McAteer! That's a brilliant goal by Jason McAteer! A header by Goodman, turned in by Venus!
Lee throws it back to McAteer, kicks it over to McGinley, he's onside! Go McGinley! Put the ball in the net! Gets the cross in, it's goal! McGinley!
Despite Bolton's John McGinley cast as a villain of the piece, the difference between Wolves' promotion and remaining in the second tier was their rancid defensive record. Despite top scoring in the division, they managed to ship 61 goals, which was a shocking 16 worse than Sunderland, who finished in 20th. The summer of '95 was all quiet on the Molineux front, as no new names came through the door. The only money spent was in turning Dean Richards' loan permanent at a cost of nearly £2 million. Nonetheless, it should have been the first attempt of a wonderful Wolves rejuvenation. That was until the club accepted an offer from Coventry for Steve Bull. Thankfully, the idea was flat out rejected from the man himself, and the club could carry on with Bull up front, but it stirred an unrest at Molineux, only worsened with a poor start to the season. By November, after a 0-0 draw with Charlton and with Steve Bull on the bench, Taylor was sacked. Despite losing only 2 of 12 games, fan sentiment decided Taylor's fate. He was replaced by Mike McGee of Leicester C.
Point. Steve Bull finally reduced the deficit 11 minutes from time.
Comes Johnson, here's Bull! 1-on-1, gets the shot in, and the goal! Oh, chance here, 1-0, good!
Osborne, Bull is onside. It's Bull against Gunn.
Whilst the club's eventual 55-point tally didn't make them immune from relegation whispers, they would coast to the end of a tumultuous season. And so the cycle continued. 1996-97 was the start of another rebuild job. Names like Ewan Roberts and Keith Curle through the door as automatic promotion was once again targeted. Naturally, although despite being well into his 30s by this point, Bull still top scored with 23 goals.
Venus supporting the attack well, and Bull goes in and equalises.
Way through the second half with a fine individual effort when he pounced on a mistake by Russell Perry.
A strong enough beginning which featured a September win at the Hawthorns was maintained either side of Christmas, with marquee triumphs at home to Man City as well as at Bramall Lane. Wolves entered the glorious year of 1997 wedged within the playoffs and within earshot of automatic promotion. Gone were the days when moneyed teams like Newcastle and Blackburn populated the top of the division, or teams too good for the league like Leeds were there or thereabouts. Wolves' opposition this time were names like Bolton, Barnsley, Sheffield United and Crystal Palace. It was with a win over one of those names, Barnsley, on February the 22nd, that gave serious thought to the idea that Wolves were off for the Premier League. After all, they'd leapfrogged the Yorkshire club into second place with 13 games left on the clock. However, 3 lost on the trot in the middle of March did them no favours, and Barnsley had overtaken Wolves going into April. Despite a win at Port Vale at the end of the month, Wolves were consigned to the dreaded playoffs. After all the investment and all the promotion chances, it was now or never.
Looking for Atkins, chance, yes! David Hopkin, and here's a chance for the Crystal Palace captain, he scored! Ferguson's free kick, it's Williams, it's in! It's a lifeline for Wolves!
1997 was the summer in which Sir Jack Hayward's patience had crumbled. He launched into a scathing interview calling himself the Golden Tit, accusing people of blackmail and saying that the club had been too sloppy with money. To remedy that, not another explosion of cash in the transfer market, but a teenager by the name of Robbie Keane. He would rejuvenate Bull despite his now catalogue of injuries.
This run, he loves to get in between Pesca-Solido and Hunt. Wolves have got to watch his runs. And there goes Pesca-Solido, and it's a back pass from Cole, and it's an own goal from Cole. A complete breakdown in communications between the
See the man to set the seal on it. Oh, yes he is.
Claimed all 3 points when Paul Cook scored the only goal after 20 minutes.
Ultimately, it was a campaign where league form was never really good enough to threaten a promotion or even a playoff push. Instead, the joy of Wolves' season could be found via the medium of the FA Cup.
Robinson challenges.
Freeman, Adeline in the middle. Gone too deep for him. Oh, it's 2-0. Super header from 17-year-old Lee Naylor. Atkins arrives. Here he is. Now can he deliver the cross? Oh, he does this time, but he's turning away.
Friedman, Molinar drawn, picked up by Robinson. This is Goodman, this is a real chance, and he scores!
Via Darlington, replays against Charlton and Wimbledon before upsetting a young Leeds United side at Elland Road, Wolves were just 90 minutes away from Wembley again. At Villa Park in the semi-final, they met the informed team that the country had to offer, Arsene Wenger's Arsenal, who were gunning for a double.
And Vieira can power forward, here is Vieira, and now Ray, and that will do! Christopher Ray for Arsenal!
And who's that up front? Not Robbie Keane and not Steve Bull either. Steve Claridge. The recent signing had ejected Steve Bull out of the starting 11. Unbelievably, he wasn't injured for this game, just not selected. A glorious outside chance of an FA Cup semi-final and day out at Wembley had been needlessly squandered.
Here's Froggatt, and they play the offside cut, well it's Bull!
Muscat, lovely cross, Steve Bull!
Any chance of a successful campaign now that Bull and Keane were working in tandem had its wings clipped with the October decision to sell Steve Froggatt to Coventry City for £1.9 million. Colin Lee took over from the sacked Mark McGee shortly after, but the season didn't particularly pick up. It would be Bull's last campaign as a Wolves player and one of near misses. There weren't trips to Wembley, there wasn't a sniff of automatic promotion, but after a loss against Bradford City, the chance at the playoffs was frittered away late on in the day. Jack Hayward was busy suing his own son to notice the club's plight. Steve Bull had gone, Don Goodman long gone, and Robbie Keane was prized away by who else but Coventry City for £6 million, and all Wolves were left with was Havard Flo, with Bull's number nonetheless, scoring 10 goals across 2 years. It took Wolves until 2003 to belatedly reach the promised land, and when they got there, pissed it away within a season, beginning another demise. Steve Bull announced his retirement in July 1999 upon medical advice, given that his troublesome left knee didn't have much mileage left in it. He would go down as the ultimate Wolverhampton Wanderers hero. For another Molyneux legend, watch our video on Stan Cullis.